I've heard from people across the country saying, we're doing such a great job at the White House. Well, it's easy to do a good job when you are acting on common sense and you are speaking the truth. And that's exactly what President Trump is doing every single day.
Politics rarely offers a dull moment, but Karoline Leavitt's debut as White House press secretary has sent a fresh benchmark for controversy. In her very first briefing, Leavitt found herself saddled with a scathing new nickname from CNN, Spinmeister, after sidestepping direct questions about the Trump administration's recent freeze on federal grants and loans. Pundits swiftly pounce on her refusal to clarify the fate of organizations like Meals on Wheels, which rely heavily on federal support. Fueling the uproar further, she declared, quote, "There will be no wokeness here," effectively dismissing long-running programs centered on diversity and inclusion. The resulting backlash reached daytime television in a blaze of indignation, culminating in a fierce exchange on The View that made for must-see television. Even its outspoken co-hosts, including Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar, voiced their frustration with uncharacteristic intensity. The federal grant freeze and Spinmeister label.
Then let me ask you a separate question about the confusion that still exists across the country right now as it relates to the freeze or the pause as it's described.
So you're asking a hypothetical based on programs that you can't even identify. What I can tell you is that
since you guys haven't identified, let's do it together just for Americans at home.
The controversy surrounding Karoline Leavitt's debut stems from a singular moment, her maiden press briefing, in which she was asked about the Trump administration's pause on federal grants and loans. This policy shift emerged from new executive orders aimed at dismantling the Biden-era focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. While the administration insists the pause is temporary, intended to review spending and eliminate initiatives they deem, quote, unnecessary social engineering, critics argue that crucial services now hang in the balance. Leavitt faced a barrage of inquiries concerning the immediate ramifications of the freeze. Journalists pressed her on whether Social Security, Medicare, and food stamps would remain intact. She confidently assured them that beneficiaries of these core programs need not worry, a statement welcomed by those who feared drastic disruptions in daily life. However, the conversation took a sharper turn when questions surfaced about smaller, more overlooked nonprofits like Meals on Wheels. These organizations are heavily dependent on federal assistance to keep essential services running. Observers pointed out that while Leavitt offered some vague reassurances, she avoided providing specific details on how such nonprofits would manage in the short term. Enter CNN's Daniel Dale, a fact-checker known for his incisive approach. After reviewing Leavitt's statements, he concluded that she had employed, quote, classic Spinmeister tactics, offering airy promises without tangible evidence of a safety net for vulnerable programs. This pointed critique quickly went viral. Other media outlets followed suit, dissecting her remarks for any sign of concrete strategy. Leavitt's performance during that first briefing became a lightning rod for debate on what the Trump administration's freeze might truly mean for local communities. The label Spinmeister stuck with astonishing speed. Within hours, news segments, blog posts, and social media erupted with commentary on her rhetorical style. Some conservative commentators stood by Leavitt, arguing that her cautious answers were prudent given the fluidity of the situation. They claimed it was too soon to reveal granular details about which programs would see continued funding. Opponents, though, saw her reluctance as a deliberate evasion, a refusal to acknowledge the real-world consequences for people reliant on community services. Amid this swirl of opinions, one point gained traction. The White House press secretary's role demands clarity and transparency, especially in matters that could impact millions of lives. By declining to offer specifics, Leavitt inadvertently fueled suspicion that the Trump administration's spending freeze might be more extensive and more damaging than initially portrayed. In many ways, this nickname, Spinmeister, crystallized the public's anxiety and distrust. After all, it's one thing to promise that Social Security checks won't vanish. It's another to guarantee a lifeline for nonprofit organizations serving the country's most vulnerable populations. Yet, if Leavitt felt any trepidation from the backlash, it did not show in her subsequent communications. In the days following her briefing, she leaned into the administration's stance that re-examining federal programs is an urgent priority. With a decisive tone, she reiterated that the freeze was under careful review, implying that clarifications would emerge once departmental audits concluded. The result was an even more polarized public discourse. Critics lambasted her as stonewalling. Supporters heralded her for shouldering the tough job of sorting beneficial spending from what they call political pork.
White House complex.
No wokeness here.
All right. What'd she say? I would like this young lady this is her first job, I would like her to do a little homework. Because she said something yesterday that really pissed me off. And that was, she said, there will be no wokeness here.
Leavitt's press briefing hadn't just ignited a policy debate, it also lit a cultural and ideological firestorm when she used the phrase, "There will be no wokeness here." In the context of White House communications, this statement was startling in its directness. She laid out plans to halt federal funding for DEI-related programs, transgender health initiatives, and other measures stemming from broader progressive policies. This stance triggered an immediate backlash from advocacy groups who viewed such programs as critical to addressing systemic inequality. The press secretary's casual dismissal seemed to trivialize hard-won milestones in civil rights, especially for communities who have fought for inclusion in college admissions, the workforce, and beyond. By framing wokeness as a hindrance or a boogeyman, Leavitt aligned with certain segments of the conservative base who see such initiatives as ideological overreach. Yet the vehement response from opponents suggested this was no ordinary policy dispute. Racial justice advocates argued that the term woke had long been associated with an awareness of social and racial disparities, an awareness born of necessity in historically marginalized communities. They saw Leavitt's comment as a direct affront to ongoing efforts to remedy past exclusions. Meanwhile, supporters of the administration championed her boldness, casting her approach as a return to what they see as traditional American values, a merit-based system free from identity-based agendas. What truly magnified the controversy was its timing. America continues to grapple with significant cultural and political fault lines, everything from the debate over critical race theory to ongoing concerns about workplace discrimination. In that context, Leavitt's dismissive remark about wokeness was akin to pouring gasoline on a smoldering flame. The media seized on the rhetorical battle, elevating it from mere policy talk to a referendum on social progress. In a matter of days, her statement became a rallying cry for both sides. Progressives labeled the administration's freeze and Leavitt's framing as regressive and dangerously out of step with a changing world. Conservatives, however, lauded her remarks as confirmation that the government was finally pushing back against what they see as politically correct overreach. The View's Meltdown, where the broader public discourse erupted most visibly, was on the daytime talk show The View, a cultural barometer that frequently reflects mainstream sentiments. The program dedicated a significant portion of its airtime to dissecting Leavitt's comments, culminating in what can only be described as an on-air meltdown. Whoopi Goldberg, one of the show's most vocal co-hosts, directed her anger squarely at Leavitt's anti-woke rhetoric. In her signature impassioned style, Goldberg declared, quote, "Without that wokeness, you might not even have that job," pointing to how women and minorities historically had to fight their way into rooms of power. Joy Behar, another longtime host, chimed in with her own brand of blunt commentary, suggesting that Leavitt's appointment might have as much to do with the former president's aesthetic standards as any qualifications. Though Behar's remark carried a joking edge, it underscored a prevalent criticism that politics often involves optics as much as substance. Now it's time to hear from you. What do you think about Leavitt's statement? Let us know in the comments section below.